Hello, this is Lady Boulay, and I'm glad you decided to join me on Black American Lineage. Thank you for your support. Thank you for continuing to support this channel and encouraging me to keep this channel going. So thank you very much. And today is one of those stories that you wish it hadn't happened, but it happened. There used to be a saying among the older people in my community when I was growing up, and they would say things like, well, it's gonna come up again. It's usually something that went down that was wrong, and people thought they had gotten away with it, but they would say, it's gonna come up again. Well, it's true. It's gonna come up again. You do something wrong, it's coming back. So that's what this discussion is about today. And it's just another page in the history of our journey in this country. Now, what I want to talk about today is an example of the law of eminent domain. The law of eminent domain. Eminent domain means that the government can take your private property for public use. They say they will pay a fair market price, but they set the price. You don't get to set the price. And they give this example. Your grandma lives on 20 acres in the center of any town, USA. The government of any town decides that they would like to put a park where Granny's house is. They can do it. They can take your land, take your house, and build that park and give you a price that may or may not be fair in your mind, but it's legal. And that is a law that was used in the United States to take land away from Black Americans. Remember, coming out of slavery, many of them hit the ground running. They went to work, they started buying property, building homes, building communities, because white people didn't want to live around them. So they began to build their own communities. But once their communities started flourishing, they decided, well, we want that land. And they would come and take your house, take your land, raise that property, and sometimes they wouldn't put anything on that property for years. But this is what we want to talk about today. This headline says, Before Central Park, the story of Seneca Village. Central Park is a city park between the Upper West Side and Upper East Side neighborhoods of Manhattan in New York City. It was the first landscaped park in the United States. And it is the most visited city park in the United States, with an estimated 42 million visitors annually as of 2016. Before Central Park was created, the landscape along what is now the park's perimeter from West 82nd to West 89th Street was the site of Seneca Village, a community of predominantly African Americans, many of whom owned property. By 1855, the village consisted of approximately 225 residents made up of roughly 2/3 African Americans, 1/3 Irish immigrants, and a small number of individuals of German descent. One of few African American enclaves at the time, Seneca Village allowed residents to live away from the more built-up sections of downtown Manhattan and escape the unhealthy conditions and racial discrimination they faced there. So this was one of the few places in the city that African Americans could live in peace, I should add. Seneca Village began in 1825 when landowners in the area, John and Elizabeth Whitehead, subdivided their land and sold it as 200 lots. Andrew Williams, a 25-year-old African American shoe shiner, bought the first 3 lots for $125. Epiphany Davis, a store clerk, bought 12 lots for $578, and the AME Zion Church purchased another 6 lots. From there, a community was born. From 1825 to 1832, the Whiteheads sold about half of their land parcels to other African Americans. By the early 1830s, there were approximately 10 homes in the village. Okay, so they're building up a community here in Seneca Village. There is some evidence that residents had gardens and raised livestock in Seneca Village, and the nearby Hudson River was a likely source of fishing for the community. A nearby spring, known as Tanner Spring, provided a water source. By the mid-1850s, Seneca Village comprised 50 homes and 3 churches, as well as burial grounds and a school for African American students. A thriving African American community. For African Americans, Seneca Village offered the opportunity to live in an autonomous community far from the densely populated downtown. Despite New York State's abolition of slavery in 1827, discrimination was still prevalent throughout New York City and severely limited the lives of African Americans. Seneca Village's remote location likely provided a refuge for this climate. It also would have provided an escape from the unhealthy and crowded conditions of the city and access to more space both inside and outside the home. Compared to other African Americans living in New York, residents of Seneca Village seem to have been more stable and prosperous. By 1855, approximately half of them owned their own homes. With property ownership came other rights not commonly held by African Americans in the city, namely the right to vote. In 1821, New York State required African American men to own at least $250 in property and hold residency for at least 3 years to be able to vote. Of the 100 black New Yorkers eligible to vote in 1845, 10 lived in Seneca Village. Now what you can see is them already setting up disenfranchisement and discrimination for black Americans. But you also see a thriving village, people who have stable homes and stabilized ideas for living in community. So this is Seneca Village. The fact that many residents were property owners contradicts some common misperceptions during the mid-19th century that the people living on their land slated for the park were poor squatters living in shanties. While some residents lived in shanties and in crowded conditions, most lived in 2-story homes. Census records show that residents were employed, with African Americans typically employed as laborers and in service jobs, the main options for them at the time. Records also show that most children who lived in Seneca Village attended school. So again, this is a thriving community, and whoever lived in the shanties, they didn't say, which means that they probably weren't black. If they were black, they would have said so. But those Irish immigrants and those Germans, they were most likely the ones living in the shanties. Because I guarantee you, now y'all know, if they had been black people, they would have been saying most of them lived in shanties, in raggedy houses. Now we get to the dog mess. The creation of Central Park. During the early 1850s, the city began planning for a large municipal park to counter unhealthful urban conditions and provide space for recreation. In 1853, the New York State Legislature enacted a law that set aside 775 acres of land in Manhattan from 59th to 106th Street between 5th and 8th Avenues to create the country's first major landscaped public park. The city acquired the land through eminent domain. Okay, so that's going to take care of Seneca Village, the law that allows the government to take private land for public use with compensation paid to the landowner. This was a common practice in the 19th century and had been used to build Manhattan's grid of streets decades earlier. there were roughly 1,600 inhabitants displaced throughout the area. Although landowners were compensated, many argued that their land was undervalued. Ultimately, all residents had to leave by the end of 1857. Research is underway to determine where Seneca Village residents relocated. Some may have gone to other African American communities in the region, such as Sandy Ground in Staten Island and Skunk Hollow in New Jersey. Although we have limited knowledge of what life was like in Seneca Village, there has been ongoing work to learn more about its residents and their lives. In 2011, archaeologists from Columbia University and the City University of New York conducted a dig of the site. They uncovered artifacts such as an iron tea kettle, a roasting pan, a stoneware beer bottle, fragments of Chinese export porcelain, and a small shoe with a leather sole and fabric upper. These items have helped us piece together what life was like for the villagers' residents. Despite its short history of only 32 years, Seneca Village is understood as a tight-knit community that served as a stabilizing and empowering force in uncertain times. Learn more about the history of Seneca Village, its property owners, and what New York City was like at this time. Yeah, that's interesting. That would be interesting to know. This is All Angels Church, which was located in Seneca Village, and this is what it looked like in 1887 after it was physically relocated to wherever they went. It doesn't say. And this is young Miss Maricha Riemann Lyons and her family own property. And as you can see, this is a very prosperous, and she is a very prosperous looking young lady. This is a picture of the remains of Seneca Village. Seneca Village was a middle-class African American community. They had a high rate of home ownership, voting, and education. But as with everything to do with black people, there's always a reason to destroy it. So it wasn't the same as destroying Black Wall Street, but the community was destroyed just the same. In this case, they used the law of eminent domain to take these people's property. Okay, y'all, thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting the channel, and I will try to upload at least 3 times a week. That'll give me time to prepare. So again, thank you for listening, and as always, have a great day.